We're back for another Gab with Abigail. If you aren't back and this is your first time on my channel, hi, welcome to Gabs with Abigail, where we talk about the Bates and Duggars and other D-list fundies. For today's video, long overdue, but we are talking about our girl Jill's book. Super excited. This is just going to be some general things that I guess caught my attention or I thought was really interesting, or that I learned for the first time reading the book. So just like a really casual kind of chat about it in general. And I will bring up Ginger's book because I have to. So let's get into it. To my OG subscribers, you guys notice I'm back on my couch? Oh my God. Thing number one, and I haven't eaten anything, so I'm going to have a coffee. I loved it. It was really, really good. It was so interesting. It was so compelling. I actually listened to it on audiobook because it took forever to get the book to come in. It was weird. I ordered it through Amazon, which also F Amazon. I will never shop at Amazon again. Anyways, I say this all to say, like, I listened to it on audiobook. I listened to it like straight through on a day at work. Like, I think I even had like a meeting to attend. I listened to that in one ear, but like y'all don't need me to say anything anyways. So it was so interesting. And it's like, Jill, thanks for sharing your story. So important. So brave, so brazen. The things that she talked about in this book. It was authentic. It was raw. You can tell it expressed the things that she really wanted to express and to convey about her story and her journey and her life. And it was awesome. It was so good. So the first thing I want to point out is that I thought was like, not necessarily like the first thing, but it comes to mind immediately. I have it written down first, is number one, that she called Josh a pedophile to her parents' face. Oh my gosh. Like, that's crazy. And I think what was so shocking about the fact that she did that is that this was years later. This was years after everything that went down with Josh happened. And you remember, like, in the Megyn Kelly video, and Jim Bob infamously says,
actually, a pedophile is an adult that preys on children. Joshua was actually 14 and just turned 15 when he did what he did. And I think the legal definition is 16 and up for being an adult preying on a child. So he was a child preying on a child.
And the fact that she felt that, like, I don't know, just to me, it's like, now why would you say that years later, when this man has kids and is around kids?
You do not view Josh as a pedophile?
No.
Like, that's interesting. I'm sure she didn't know what was going on in his life to say that, but it's like, but you said it. You know what I mean? It's like, that's so interesting, especially because a mere, like, what, 3 or 4, maybe 5 years later, what would come out about him? Like, that you were right, that it's so right that you they treat Jill more like she's the prodigal son than they do Josh. And that's so true. It's so true. And I think that also goes in line with just how IBLP views women, which I think Jill talks about in this book, but that just so much more of the social responsibility falls onto their shoulders, right? And the fact that they're the most interesting and compelling part of the story of the cult, of the organization, and part of that is because almost of their subjugation. Like, it's so much more interesting to be looking like as voyeurs at how women are living under this much control and this much, you're kind of a second class person in this world, you know? And up and down these systems, IBLP will say that, no, we don't think women are second class. We think everybody is, you know, equal but different, you know, separate but equal. The control aspect that women endure, the silence that they're meant to have, the fixing, the standards that they are meant to have, like, would suggest otherwise, right? It's so bold that she said that to them. They were treating her like she is, like, because she wasn't fulfilling that role of, this is what we say women are supposed to do in our high control organization, and you're not doing that, that she was punished, that she was like judged so harshly by her parents and ostracized for that. And it's like, oh, so like it's everything that we've been saying that it is, like, The second thing that I found really, really interesting about this book is the grace that Jill, like Ginger, extends to her mother in the book. I feel like they handle Michelle so softly, and I don't want to say I think that that's interesting, as if I don't understand where that comes from, but it is interesting that they do. And I can only assume it's because, I won't even say I assume. To me, in my opinion, the reason why they do is that, one, they're spending day in and day out supporting their mother in a way that they don't their father. So there is a different kind of like intimacy and reality of who Michelle Duggar is and what she endures that we don't see. And I feel like that's why they're more sympathetic to her. I feel like they acknowledge that she is also a victim of the cult because she's a woman. And for that reason, I just feel like they extend so much grace in terms of how they talk about their parents and this kind of high control aspect. And I think it's because, also that they acknowledge that this is a patriarchal cult that we have grown up in, and the source of everything is really the father, is the man. But I do feel like, yes, they both kind of acknowledge that their mother plays a part in perpetuating that control level, and that while she is not simply just a bystander who is a victim that is a yes man, she does proactively make choices as well regarding some of the things that they have done. Michelle is 10 toes down for IBLP, just as Jim Bob is. But again, I do just feel like they have a soft spot for her that goes beyond just that this is your mother, and also that I do think she is probably the more nice and compassionate one compared to Jim Bob. That makes it harder to be I don't want to say angry, but to fault her in the same way that you could fault Jim Bob, is what I would say. Because at the end of the day, money is going to become a problem, is one of the main issues of this book and of Jill's story. That Michelle, you had to have played a role in that, right? But at the same time, no, because Jim Bob is controlling all of the finances. He's the patriarch. He's the leader in the center of their home. And I just feel like the most like kind of like close we get to criticism of Michelle is at the beginning of the book, and I'll give like a couple examples. Technically, there was no problem with Derek and I being outside together that way. We weren't on a date or anything, so we didn't need a formal chaperone. Plus, there was easily a half dozen little Duggars running around out there with us playing in the snow. We were safe. We were following all the courtship rules that my parents had encouraged us to write down. No holding hands, no in-person one-on-one conversations without adult or mature chaperone present, no putting ourselves in a position where we could fall into temptation. All the same, I knew that people would be watching us. It was to be expected. In between rides on the sled down the hill that runs away from the house, we were trading stories. Derek talking about the new job he was about to start, me telling him about my week as a student midwife. At some point, the conversation was probably going to turn to the different wedding venues we'd been looking at. We were doing nothing unusual, nothing that any other couple of 20-somethings who were weeks away from getting engaged would hesitate to do. I was happy, at peace, and in love. So I was surprised when I heard Mom call out, "Hey kids!" The snow was soaking up the sound, and I felt like the whole world was listening. When I turned to see her standing on the front porch, my stomach dropped. She was smiling that same smile the world has seen for years, a smile that's pure innocence but protects like a shield. And her voice was full of sweetness and joy, but I knew that voice well. By that point in my life, I'd been obeying it for 23 years. I knew what was coming next. No boys and girls on the same sled. Yes, ma'am, I said, jumping off the sled immediately. But Derek didn't move. At least he didn't back away from the sled, the scene of our crime. Instead, he was looking around. He was trying to figure out who my mom could have been addressing like that. Some of the little Duggars, maybe? A second passed, and another. Finally, he stopped searching. His face shifted from curiosity to something like bewilderment. He turned back to the big house, called out, "I'm sorry, Mrs. Duggar," and got to his feet. I was grateful that he had gotten off the other side of the sled from me, making sure It was between us so that all eyes that were currently upon us could see that we were being obedient. She was smiling that same smile the world has seen for years, a smile that's pure innocence but protects like a shield, and her voice full of sweetness and joy. And yeah, I think that's the one thing about Michelle Duggar that gets me, and I love that she just said this, is that like her demeanor, like people make fun of her, like her Michelle Duggar voice all the time, but to me it's a veneer, and like that's why people say it's fake, right? That she doesn't, there's no way that she actually talks like that. And yeah, and I feel like this is an example of it, that it's something she comes off as so guarded.
That's why her hair is so big. It's full of secrets.
And her personality, like the smile, the sweetness all the time, feels like a shield. Like I feel like we don't know at all ever at any time what's going on in Michelle Duggar's mind. It's like this joy that she's always supposed to be presenting, but also that this is a part of, again, the high control that she could have been talking to anybody, that she didn't even say any names of who she was talking to, and Jill immediately obeyed. Instant obedience, right? And just kind of like this disturbing high control aspect that, again, that she's a part of this system, that it can't all just be attributed to Jim Bob. And again, I don't think that this is Jill making a criticism of her mother necessarily, but that it is kind of like tell-all-y in a sense, that is something personal to say about her, that like this smile, this joy that she puts on is also a shield. I think other little ways that I would say that kind of come close to criticism is when they have that when they have that mediation session. And Michelle says like, oh, that letter that you sent us was the most disrespectful thing that I have ever read. I feel like that's the closest we've ever gotten from hearing like something negative out of Michelle Duggar's mouth, especially having been said by one of her kids. And that's not to say that the letter wasn't disrespectful. I'm sure that it was. The context in which Jill describes that her and Derek sent the letter. I apologize if I'm telling this story as if you've read the book, or go read the book. That's okay. But the context in which they send the letter, they're like, we've been working on it for days. We were tired and we just wanted to send it. I think we've all been there, where you're like typing out a really long text message. You read it over. You've been working on it. Like, and it's just like, fuck it. I'm just going to send it. Because I'm tired of it, and just it's gonna be what it is, and I think it's fine, and it probably could have used a couple more proofreads. It probably could have used I'm not gonna send it all, and you sent it anyways. So we've all been in that situation. I feel like I was in that situation this morning. I wish we could have read that letter. I wish that was included in the book, but like, let me not be too nosy. But yeah, it's just really interesting, the amount of grace that they give her. 3. Okay. I thought this was so interesting when Jill tells the story about the phrase in their family of not stirring up contention amongst the brotherhood. Because I feel like, yes, bitch, finally confirming what we've all known for years, is that you guys lie to us. Like, you guys lie to the general public. You guys lie to people who aren't within your family. You withhold things. I thought that was so interesting, because it was like, yes, I know that you guys lie to us. You know what I mean? And I think that it's so interesting that, being a filming family, that she talks about those lies that Christians do, that they feel like, well, I'm being truthful amongst the people who it's important to be truthful to, so it doesn't matter if I lie to you in this way. And then just also how controlling it is to have to be like secretive, not only from other people, but amongst yourself. And also like that secretiveness, how it creates this very insular community where you guys are really bonded and tied together by these secrets, and how that is another aspect of control, because you can't go and talk to people about these things. And even though it might seem innocuous, it's good to be able to talk to people outside of your family, outside of your circle, about things. And so again, how it's just kind of like another control method. But back to like the lies, because for the longest time, I swear to God, the Duggar daughters would be like, oh, yeah, we help out, but we never change diapers. That's something that mom and dad do. And like, that has to be a lie from the pit of hell. There's no way that Michelle and Jim Bob are the only ones all damn day changing the diapers. Like, there's no way that's true. which Jill confirms in her book when she's like, oh, by the age of 12, I was able to, feed a baby and change a diaper, and also help cook dinner. Like, yeah, we knew. Like, like little white lies like that where it's like, why? And then when they kept saying, because they would say this all the time, I would remember this, when they'd be like, oh, yeah, it's whatever God's plan is. If the show keeps going, if it were done tomorrow, we would be perfectly fine with that. And like, that wasn't true, because Jim Bob did everything in his power to keep the show going, to please the network, X, Y, and Z. He was making money and he did not want that to stop. So it's just like, because even like how that creates the pressure to perform the way your parents want you to perform for your siblings, so that you aren't making trouble, right? So like, and that you aren't causing the other ones to do it, because almost like, if all of us, if even one of you steps out of line with wearing pants, more people are going to start wearing pants. If one of you asks questions about how come we're not getting paid, somebody else, or if somebody gets paid and you're like, okay, don't tell anybody, nobody else, because nobody else is going to get paid. And you tell somebody that you're getting paid, that's going to stir up contention among the brethren, right? So it's just really interesting, these tactics of like basically using the Bible. I mean, that's all throughout the book. That's the whole point of IBLP, and Jill's criticism like creates fear and like mistrust. I don't know, that we're supposed to look at Jim Bob as like this great Christian, and it's like, I don't know. I don't think so, right? It was just so much more important to you to be making money and to be staying popular and to be making money. And sections like that in the book are also, again, why this book feels very tell-all-y, right? Because that's a very intimate detail to be sharing about your family, that Jim Bob would do those kinds of things, like in family meetings. Okay, 4, I think. I think it's interesting that Jill, like Ginger, doesn't complain at all about the parentification that she went through. And yeah, I think that that's very interesting, that for her and for Ginger, that's not a part of their, I don't want to say trauma, but it's not a part of the IBLP experience that they hated. And why I want to talk about that is that I really do feel like there's this misconception about the Duggars and the Bates regarding how they were raised in terms of being in a high control group. Because what it feels like from all of the siblings is that they're not unhappy with their childhood that they have. They lived a very unconventional life, and they had a really interesting upbringing. It's just kind of natural in a big family that you're gonna have to help out with the siblings, and depending on how your parents navigate that, it's gonna feel different, right? So that's why I think like for them, they don't complain so much about it. Like it's almost like the one aspect that Michelle and Jim Bob got right in terms of how much handling of the children and how you would like use that. They're not complaining about, again, their childhood, and necessarily like their complaint is that how they were raised, what it ultimately did to them as adults, like the after effects of that, and why they would do things a little bit different, or very different, right? That this aspect of fear and control that ultimately came out of it and followed them into their adult life and seeped into their religion in an unhealthy way, that is where their complaint lies. Because even the criticism of Jim Bob isn't a criticism of religion itself or God itself, or even necessarily, again, like the childhood that he gave them. Jim Bob was attracted to this cherry picking type of religion because it allowed him to do that for himself when it came to having money. Like that just is like a really just very interesting part of both of their stories, that like I just feel like they really don't complain about that parentification aspect. It's just really like a very unique experience that they had growing up. I always think like when I think about the Duggars and the Bates, like childhood, to me it just feels like exhausting. That's what I think of when I think about like what it would be like to live in this lifestyle, is that it just feels like it would be so exhausting, to have that many people to always be helped, look after, that many people to be cleaning up after. Then you have this high control, high religion aspect. And that it's like go, go, go. There really isn't ever a stop. And then especially like you're filming a television show on top of that. So, basically we see influencers having to do content creation. That's your everyday single life. That their lives just seem so exhausting. All of the laundry, all of the packing that they had to do, taking kids to lessons, taking them to doctor's appointments, dental appointments, like all of those things that just seem so exhausting. Like that there's, and also again, that's part of like that high control aspect, that if you're kept busy enough, you won't stop to think. We know from, I think it's Growing Up Duggar, no, not Growing Up Duggar, Raising 19 Children or something like that, the Michelle Duggar and Jim Bob's original book, that they talk about how the kids aren't allowed to say that they're bored. Again, just this idea of like your mind is you're always having to do something. You're always kept busy with something. You're never alone either. And like, it just seems like really exhausting. Exhausting. I think that's also another reason why Jill and Ginger handle talking about Michelle so gently, is because they didn't have that experience with their mother. In the same way, like again, I just feel like they don't, at least from what they've written, that they haven't interpreted that part of their lifestyle as negative or bad or harmful, because there's all this rhetoric online about like them being sister moms. And like the joke, because it's a criticism of Michelle. Again, I'm just saying like they don't give her this criticism, but it's a criticism of Michelle. And like the joke online, I don't know if there's like an actual clip where people are like, when it's like a video, it's like Michelle's picture, and it's like, what does she do? And somebody said it. I've quoted this a million bajillion times in my videos, like from a Duggar insider, that Michelle is like the manager day to day, and they're the like little worker bees helping out. And I think almost in a way that's how they saw it, right? It's not to call each other sister moms. That's how they feel about it. The next thing I want to talk about that I found really interesting in this book, and I feel like it's kind of aligned with like Jill saying that it's not necessarily her childhood, as she grew up before television, like even little aspects of her childhood, even past that, that she's unhappy with, which is that how strongly in this book that Jill wanted to condemn the people who released the In Touch, the report with, all of the stuff that Josh did to them. And so she goes on to name every single person who was involved with the release of it by first and last name at least 3 times in this book, in the same exact order, to kind of really hammer home the point that what you did was wrong. Talking to the people I trusted didn't take away the feeling of humiliation and shame that I was experiencing, but it did help to clarify who I held accountable for all this. The chief of police at the time, Kathy O'Kelly, the city of Springdale and its attorney, Ernest Kate, Washington County Sheriff's Office and its major sheriff, Rick Hoyt, the magazine itself, In Touch, and its parent company, Bauer, plus any other unnamed players. In the months and years that followed, a lot of people have shared their opinions on how I responded to the releasing of the report. Some offered their support and their understanding, and I'm grateful to them. But others have accused me of blaming the wrong people. They said I was covering for my parents, that it was Mom and Pop's fault, that all this happened in the first place. It wasn't, and I'm not. I hold Josh responsible for his actions, and I hold In Touch, Bauer, Kathy O'Kelly, Ernest Kate, the city of Springdale, the Washington County Sheriff's Office, and Rick Hoyt responsible for illegally releasing and publishing the report, for inflicting on me and my sisters the trauma of a second victimization, a trauma that was made so much worse than the first by the fact that it was public. I am clear about the mistakes that my parents have made over the years with our upbringing, especially Pop's. I told you there's that gentle handling of Michelle. But the way my parents handled or didn't handle the things with Josh does not influence or justify the release of juvenile records and further re-traumatization and exploitation of innocent victims. And I think she's right saying that, writing it in her book, because they ultimately they lose their legal battle against all those people. And to me, it feels like one of two things, which is one, I also am on the, I feel like I'm in the camp of people who are like, I'm going to say that Jill reacted wrong to it, but who blame her parents, because they do play a role in it, unfortunately. While that role might not have been intentional, of course, obviously, they do play a role in the fact that the upbringing that they were, that they had their children in kind of contributed to this kind of abuse, and that they didn't read into the red flags of the fact that IBLP was, producing material. Like, there was enough cases within the organization for them to produce materials about how you should react to those sort of things. I do genuinely, and I'm sure this is how Jill and the other girls who were victims feel, was that their parents did the best that they could with what they had, with what they had. And that's that's viable. That's a human thing for sure. And I just feel like right now the theme of this weekend for me is grace. And so it's heavy on my mind, but that they deserve some grace. And again, to me, that goes back to this idea that I feel like both Ginger and Jill kind of suggest in their books that their parents are also victims of the IBLP system, especially their mother. That they think they're doing all these right things, and there's all of this craziness running rampant, and all of the ways that a religion makes you ignore those things, like they fall into those traps. So I think that's part of the reason why they say, like, it's really not our parents' fault what happened. And that's not who I blame for all of this. But me personally, I can't, as an outsider, I can't excuse the ways that their mistakes contributed to that. And because it feels like by staying involved with IBLP, for never acknowledging that played a role in this, is, to me, I think why me and others are so aggressively like, no, especially because Jim Bob later goes on to the stand and says that are you going to let me talk to me that way, or I don't recall this traumatic thing that happened in your family. And that every turn, like, that he was willing to kind of lie about it. To me, that they went forward with this show, right, counting the cost, because I think it's important to understand that the reality is that this probably would not have gone public if your family wasn't in the limelight. Which, does that make it right? No, but I do also think that just the way, like that, just the way that Jill and Ginger are writing these books to kind of undo the things that they co-signed and put out there into the world, for those people who released the report, it was kind of like, this is what you are, this is the organization that they're in, and that they're presenting as wholesome. Like, where there is smoke, and that's what this is, that's what this police report is, there must be fire. Which, in fact, there was, when we look at all of these sexual assault allegations that would come out against Bill Gothard. We know that there are other forms of abuse that happened within the families that were involved in IBLP, both sexual and physical. And then that also occurred within the Duggar family and what Josh is, right? So I think, should they have been the sacrificial lambs of this? Like, did they deserve that? No. Were they, in that sense, not thinking of the victims wrong for that? Yes. But your parents were also wrong for that. And I think that it's appropriate, it's fine for them not to blame their parents. I mean, I think that makes sense. Personally, for all the reasons that I just mentioned, like, I think it makes perfect sense. But I don't think that they should get a pass from the public regarding the choices that they made. That these two people, Michelle and Jim Bob, are 10 toes down for this still. That there really is very few things that they're willing to say, this was actually a mistake in how I did that. And I think that's also, like, kind of what gets under people who are healing skin, like for Jill, like why this kind of book is important, why for Ginger this kind of book is important, why for other people who have left IBLP and other high control groups, why this kind of stuff is important to talk about, is how your parents can be so unapologetic about what it is that they did, and that there is no change in them, that there is no even like, I'm sorry, there is no, reflection that actually maybe I didn't get this right. So yeah, I think it's really, really interesting and powerful that Jill wanted to condemn these people so strongly in her books, and she couldn't in the legal system. And even if she had won the court case, I'm sure she still would have wanted to. Yeah, so, and I think also what I loved about this was the power behind it. I could feel it. I could feel the power behind it. Like it felt like I'm reading a healed Jill's voice. Someone that has been growing up in a culture that says, be quiet, be submissive, be humble, accept struggle, sufferings of Christ, and all of this, to be so declarative about this kind of thing. And I just like, it's so wonderful, it's so powerful, and it just shows that how much Jill is doing to do the work and to heal. And so while I just said all that I said, I love that she said this. It's so important that she did. Okay, so now this was the juiciest part of this book, and this was also the meat and potatoes of it, right? All of the money SHIT that went down with Jim Bob. Because I feel like I only knew bits and pieces of it. I feel like I didn't realize how much I didn't know until I watched Shiny Happy People. I know I said I was going to talk about that. I still have not talked about that. But I feel like I really didn't. I was like, what? Reading this book and watching Shiny Happy People. Because I knew that Jim Bob hadn't been paying them. Like, I knew that. And was that messed up? Absolutely. Was he wrong for that? Of course. Like, did that seem very greedy? Yes. Why aren't you paying your kids to be on this television show? Especially, they were grown as hell. And why weren't they getting, like, a good equal share? Especially the girls, which, Derek basically kind of touches on in the book, and Jill too. Like I said before, they are the most interesting part of this show. They're why everybody watches. If this had been a show that was just about the boys of IBLP, baby, y'all would not have had more than 2 seasons, max, period. Okay? Because people are tuning in for Michelle's birth, and then they're tuning in for the older girls' dating and courtship, and then seeing them get married, having their own babies, seeing them like basically helping to raise their kids, their reaction to certain things, like blah, blah, blah. Like, they were the meat and potatoes of this damn show. Like, let's call it what it is. And to be so like arrogant as to act as though that's not the case. But not only that, but also I think the most shocking part of this, one, he's not paying them. Big shout outs to Derek. I loved that whole scene that Jill describes Derek confronting her dad about money. It was like, that he was so used to people, his kids basically, like not giving him any pushback, just falling in line and obeying, of like, so how much he wanted, Derek to drop the subject. And Derek's like, no, actually, I want to know. Like, the math actually isn't mathing for how much you're making us work, and yet we're not getting anything. Because I get it, like, right? And no, there's no way that you guys aren't seeing money from this. Why isn't any of that falling into our hands? Like, because the idea, like, oh, you guys are gonna all get it later, baby. When I know I'm telling this out of order, but when Jim Bob was like, we have all of this set up and it's going to get split. All of our assets are going to get split evenly 19 ways when your mom and I pass. What the fuck? Excuse my language. When you guys die, what? You know how many years off that is? Respectfully, like, Lord willing, okay? Like, just, they're barely 50, I think. Okay, they're not even 60 yet. So there's still a good, they both, I'm sure, have a good 20, 25 years in them. Okay, these are people who don't drink and they don't smoke. I feel like probably the only thing that's against their, advantage is probably maybe diet and exercise. But I feel like, like I said, Christians technically practice mindfulness. So they have all these people in their lives who can take care of them. Like, it's just, the math isn't mathing on when you guys will die and everybody will see this inheritance. Like, they've been working this entire time, okay? Some of them since the day that they were born, recording that damn show. And there's no money? Are you insane? No, you're not insane. You're greedy. Like, absolutely so crazy. Like, when I read that, I was like, what? Like, no, like you said that like that was valid. But I think like the most shocking thing, okay, because I feel like we kind of expect, I knew that he wasn't paying them. But when they talked about the taxes situation, some very, very shisty SHIT, which was that basically Jim Bob and his accountant were filing taxes for Jill as though she was getting paid. She wasn't seeing any of this money. And then when they started to get into conflict about money and about, Jill's lifestyle of wanting to wear pants and stuff, all of a sudden they don't file their taxes. And they get a letter from the IRS like, oh, you owe money on your taxes. What? And they're like, oh, we've never seen any of this money. That was so effing shady. That was so shady. I was like, oh, Jim Bob, you're going straight to hell, babe. Straight down there. Like, on a slide. You know what I mean? If we believe in in a hell that is unrepentant and burning and hot. Like, if that was a real place and that's really how that works out, babe, I hate to say it. Like, that was just so shady. Okay, and then the other thing with the money that was just so shady was, first of all, when Derek was asking for money and he was like, well, so how much do you think that you're worth? Bitch. When I read that, I was like, oh, that's so bold and saucy and so rude. And so rude. Like, that's a point that you're making. And to me, the thing is like, oh, I must be worth a lot of money because y'all are pressing me hard as hell to continue to do the show, right? It's Jill and Jessa, so I must be worth a lot of money if this is what's going to be putting the show back on the network. Okay. Just bold as hell. Talking about this money with the tax preparer, when Jim Bob decided to like give everybody $80,000, mind you, they've been doing the show at this point for like at least like, I want to say probably like 8 or 10 years, okay? Like, they've been on the show for mad long. $80,000. The other part that was so shady and just, not even shady, but just like evil. As a parent, as a person, how dare you? When Jim Bob sends them an invoice of all the money they've supposedly spent on Jill throughout the years. I think maybe since like the TLC show started. The audacity. I'm going to read it. We got an email from him a couple of weeks later, and as I read the opening lines, I felt genuinely surprised. Jill and Derek, we love you both and want to see our differences resolved. I have been praying and fasting about all of this. I need to share my heart with you, ... I have made some bad decisions along life's way and have hurt you all. I am sorry about that. I was wrong for things that I have said and done, and I pray you will please forgive me. It was a good start. Maybe he'd had a change of heart and was actually going to reconcile with us after all. But the further I read, the worse I felt. Yes, we allotted at different times amounts to our children for tax purposes because each one of our children were benefiting from having all of their needs met: food, clothing, shelter, utilities, music lessons, education, travel instruments, vehicles, phones, medical insurance, medical bills, etc. I want to talk to a tax preparer, and I bet you because giving them certain amounts of money allocated like from a tax perspective meant that overall he was paying less in taxes because it was putting him in a different like tax bracket threshold, and that's probably why he was doing that. Because isn't like when he went to Senate or when he was in the Congress or whatever, he like helped to push a bunch of laws that would make like taxes and stuff like that easier for people who are like landlords or landowners or property owners, I think is the word. And so I'm sure that this was all just some shiesty SHIT that you were doing and calling it this. Not to mention, these are all things that parents who are taking care of children are obligated to pay for them. Like, you chose as a parent to prioritize music lessons. The whole thing with vehicles, I think this was from Ginger's book, where he says that, no, this was from Growing Up Duggar, actually, where they write about how their father made it a point to buy each one of them a car when they first started learning how to drive, as a gift to them, basically. But whereas the boys had to earn theirs. So what is it now, Jim Bob? Here are some, medical insurance and medical bills. You're her parent. Yes, you should be paying her medical bills and medical health insurance. Like, I'm confused. And her phone bill. Again, you're her parent. Why wouldn't you be paying those things? This is a girl who isn't allowed, based off of your religion, to work outside of the house. So I'm confused. Here are some low numbers of what we have approximately spent on Jill in the last few years. And I want to say, like, okay, so are we saying this in terms of the context of Jill's marriage, that's what they mean? But anyway, here are some low numbers of what was approximately spent on Jill in the last few years. Apartment rent, $750 times 24 months equals $18,000. Utilities discounted, $600 times 36 equals $21,600. Midwife education, $5,000. Honda Pilot, $9,000. HARP, $15,000. Let me talk about that $15,000 HARP, because what's so crazy about that, and I think Jill talks about that in this book, and again, this shisty ass money stuff, right? They wrote a book, the four girls got an advance of money, and then probably money after the book sold, and didn't basically see a dime of that money. What they instead received was a HARP, a $15,000 HARP. Did you ask them if that's what she wanted? Right? She could have used that $15,000 for like a savings for when she gets married, or to pay for those midwife education, since apparently that was something that was being footed on your bill. Like, that's so insane to count this as something that you guys spent money on her. And again, like with the Honda Pilot, that why did you guys then make it such a point to like, oh, we're going to buy you a car, and then to do this? Furniture, $5,000. If you don't want the furniture, we'll buy it back after 4 years of use for $3,000. Like, cell phone at 50 times 120 months equals $6,000. Car insurance, $50 per month times 8 years, $4,800. So again, adding up things from when she was not married and when she was. Vehicle fuel, 8 years times 50 a month equals $4,800, which I think is crazy that she's only spending $50 a month on gas. Eating out, $100 a month with family debit card for 8 years, $9,600. Clothes and Goodwill on family debit cards, $1,000 per year times 8 years equals $8,000. I have a hard time believing all this thrifty shopping that they're making this girl do, that it costs $1,000 per year to clothe her. I just feel like at her age, with the parents that she had, to say that she was spending $8,000 a year on clothes. Eating at home, $3 per day times 12 years equals $13,140. Like, imagine your parents sending you a bill for what it was to feed you a year. And I know that there are some people who really do experience this, but the girl is filming nonstop, making money, earning an income. What the fuck do you mean you're going to charge me or adding it up what it is that you're feeding me? Like, that's so nuts. And these are parents who are supposed to be like, oh, we love children. Interesting. Gift to Dillard Family Ministries, $10,000. You paid yourself a salary from this, stated that there was only $1,200 left when you closed it out, so you must have eventually received it. You can refund this ministry gift, and we will give it to you directly if you want us to. $129,940 is just the beginning of Jill's expenses paid by Duggar family over the last several years. Most of this was made and spent on Jill before you two were married. Imagine, before they were even married. And I think what's also insane about this is, even to total this number, right? If Jill had been getting paid all of the money that her father was claiming in her taxes, that what would this $129,940 be, right? It would have been paid for, right? If she had made money alone just off of the wedding special, the birthing specials, the mini episodes, and then the full episodes that they had for that, right? All of the content that they did leading up to the wedding, wouldn't this have been paid back? Also taking into account many other ways that we have spent money to help you all. For example, installing the AC in your home in El Salvador, the stove, the washing machine, etc. The total on Jill's tax returns was $130,250. We would be willing to write a check for $20,000 to settle this once and for all. Jill, when Mom and I pass on, you are set to receive 1/19 of everything we own that is set up in a trust for you kids. If you attack us, probably your inheritance will be lowered significantly. I love you, but I am grieved by the disrespect and the accusations that continue. I have asked for forgiveness, and I hope that you will also. You have deeply offended your mother and I. We love you and forgive you for the things you have said and done. $20,000 is a one-time offer. Take it or leave it. Please let me know by Monday night or the amount will be zero. Love, Daddy Duggar. The audacity, right? The audacity. And I think what this was coming from at the point that he sends this letter is because they're asking him, well, we want to know why you have been reporting to to the IRS that we're making all this money. And we want to know how much money the show has earned over time. And we want to be compensated for what you're saying is on our tax returns. And that's where this letter comes out of like, well, here's all the way where this $130,000 came from. So I meant to say like, okay, and to make things all even and say like, let bygones be bygones, we'll give you $20,000 to wrap this up nicely and never have to speak about it again. Like, just incredibly shysty. And this is not the first time, right? This is Jill going on record with her story, but this is not the first time that people have said that Jim Bob is very shady and duplicitous when it comes to money. Like, people outside your family are saying that. So like, again, where there's smoke, there is most likely fire. And this is so on brand. This is what we've been saying. And you know what's so crazy about this is that for the longest time, I have been like, I feel like I don't know if I heard rumors about this somewhere. I feel like it couldn't just naturally pop into my head, but like this suspicion that Jim Bob was doing something really shady with his taxes. And I think what made me think something shady was going on is the fact that he kept saying that the show was a ministry. Because when things are church related, depending on what it is, obviously I don't know tax laws that well, you can say that you don't have to pay any taxes on that because it's church related. Right? They're doing all this home church stuff. I don't know. To me, like, it's shady. It's shady as hell. And so for us to be hearing about all of these, like, you're filing taxes on your kids without telling them, and without paying them, without them ever seeing this money is so crazy. And then to come back and like, this is so manipulative. It's very gaslighty to say like, what? Look at all the ways that you have seen this money. Be grateful. Like, as if their entire lives they have not been raised as though the parents are supposed to be doing this. Like, it's weird. Like, it's just so strange. It's so weird. It is just insane. Like, Jim Bob, you're not a good person. I'm so sorry. Like, you're not a good person. I don't know how other way to say that. Like, you're just not a good person. Oh, I've been holding this mic too close. I'm passionate. Like, reading this part of the book, I was shocked. Or I guess listening to it, I was shocked. When I first, like, going through a list of money that you spent on your kid, 8 years of clothes, 12 years of food. And mind you, TLC is paying for this, not you. TLC, the girl is working, right? He talks about after the show becomes successful, they're shooting for like 10 to 11 months out of the year. Like, so are they working or are they not? And the fact that she's saying, whenever it was time to record, I would get anxiety because they love to just spring things on us to see how we would react to them because it was so, different out the norm from like the Duggar lifestyle, etc., etc. Like this idea that Jill does throughout the book of like counting the costs, which obviously like this part of the book is the meat and potatoes of that theme. Like in terms of this, like counting the costs, like this is like that you would have the gall to take the time out and say, I'm going to count the cost of raising you because you're asking for money for the work that you've done. Audacious. I love that as a part of this book, the counting the cost aspect. When I listened to the audiobook, I didn't get the quote that she was saying, and I guess because it's in KJV, that like listening to it doesn't make as much sense as reading it, because reading it I was like, oh, this makes perfect sense. Or like when I heard it, I was like, I'm thinking that what this is supposed to mean is that like before you do something, before you build something, you have to first sit down and count the cost, and just at a metaphorical level, at what expense, you know, to achieve this thing is it going to cost. And that her parents really didn't look at that except from an aspect of finances, which if you're raising a large family, obviously finances are going to play a really important part. But the fact that it was not only so greedy, but what it brought out of Jim Bob's character, which obviously was always there, latent, right? This high control aspect of him, you know, I forget who said it. A ministry like IBLP attracts people who are already controlling or want, like, have that kind of controlling aspect in them, because it now gives them a justification. It gives them a tool to continue to perpetuate that behavior. It gives them an excuse and a reason to be like abusive in that sense, to be controlling like that. Okay, so another part of the money aspect that I want to talk about is when they request their contracts and stuff. In late October, we hired an attorney who sent a formal demand letter to Pops asking for the 2014 contract as well as copies of the Mad Family Inc. bylaws, minutes, and other details that I, as a shareholder, should have seen already. Period, poo. Like, ooh, that was such a ballsy move. Like, good for you, girl. Good for you, sis. Pops went ballistic. And I'm sure he did, because that was so bold and such a far step out of the high control that he was inflicting on these people. Like, because she was right. I have every right to see that. And the fact that money was a thing for them, like, and this is after, mind you, this is after they get that email from Jim Bob talking about all the money that he spent on them. Like, good, because you were so bold to send that bleeping email. So let me see how much money you've been making over the years, since this was such an expensive cost to you to the point where you can't pay me what I think I'm owed. Like, why wouldn't you send them the contract that they had signed? That's weird. Like, they signed it. Why wouldn't they have a right to see that? This, and TLC, FTLC as well, for saying, oh, you gotta handle that with your father. FTLC as well, that after 19 Kids and Counting was canceled, that they still went to Jim Bob to make a show, and that they still kept them locked into that contract from prior. That's insane. That's insane. Like, that shouldn't, that like TLC was very, very wrong for that. And obviously because they were already benefiting from whatever had been negotiated out of it, like, why change anything? You know what I mean? We're under the assumption you guys are getting paid anyways. Why change anything? Nuts. Like, as soon as that got canceled, that's why I mean, it should have been the case that, and that's probably why they wanted to ask for this contract, that if the show is canceled, that we're not bound by this contract. Like, that doesn't make any sense. She should have been getting the minutes and the bylaws to see what they were talking about, right? If she's involved in this, like, where is my money, Jim Bob? Ooh. I also liked that she talked about how once some of her siblings did start getting paid after 2017, like small amounts per episode, that, you know, they were just like, oh, okay, this is fine. I'm grateful. Thanks. You know, like, oh, you're feeding me scraps off the table. You know, I'm so thankful for that. Like, your dog does in fact love you if you drop a little bit something under the table. Not to be rude, but I love that she used the language that they've been brainwashed to thinking that was good enough, that was acceptable, because that's exactly the right kind of language to say about that sort of thing, because it wasn't acceptable. It wasn't okay. Like, you guys are grown adults, even if for the ones who weren't, I'll say that for the ones who were grown, like, that wasn't okay. It wasn't okay. And now I feel like hearing all of this with the money and the contracts, I have been a strong defender of, like, when people say attack Jessa and say that she you know, is living off of Jim Bob's money, that that's the only way that her and Ben get by. When people say that, like, who was it? I think it was like, I don't want to say that. You know what channel I'm talking about, was like how when Jessa puts out the videos like, like, oh, I love my mom, I love my dad. She's doing like damage control. Even more recently, when she announced her pregnancy, people were like, oh, she's just doing this to distract from Jill's book, which I don't think that she did. To me personally, maybe she did. It really, to me, didn't get so much traction. There was way too many people. I feel like she had to announce her pregnancy like 3 times because nobody was paying attention. And I just feel like the kind of kindness, the way that Jessa and Jill still talk about each other as though they're friends still, I feel like, and Ginger, I feel like if there's no beef, there's no malice there. Though I can see wanting to still like protect her parents' image because she has not had this beef with them. But yeah, like I said, I was like a big defender, but obviously clearly at a certain point they were making money. Jessa was very clearly always on the show actively. I will always say this, like, my back hurts, in general about Jessa, which is that I feel like for her, the system has worked, so she's fine with it. And people hate her for that. I feel like they want her to be something that she's not. Like, her life has gone fine. Her life has been okay. She's happy with her life. She's content in a way that's different from her sisters. And I think because she has such a strong personality, people have a hard time seeing, like, how can it be both? That, like, how is it the other two, Jill and Ginger, are the ones who are like this and you're not? And also that the fact that oh my God, all these fucking J names. The fact that Jessa still defends her parents, I think and has that kind of strong personality about it, defends the sort of lifestyle, I think also rubs people the wrong way. But I say this all to say that this whole contract thing was so interesting, and that they finally were able to get it, and that they were strong on it and stood firm on it. Because I feel like there's been a rumor for a while that, like, they never saw any money. And I think maybe at the time that I'm thinking of when they said this, they had not yet seen money, because this was pretty recent. I want to say, what this is, 2018, 2019 that this is happening. They're asking for it. Jim Bob is mad. And then finally one late night at the deadline for when, I forget, what was the deadline? Somebody let me know. I don't feel like reading back. Oh, like, you need to give this to us. Or like, I think that Jim Bob was like, if you don't accept our terms, blah, blah, blah. And so like at midnight, Michelle comes and brings the contract and jams it in their door, which this is the most interesting part, right? The compensation part of the contract. It stated that for each half-hour episode, Mad Family Inc. would be paid $50,000, and for each 1-hour episode, $65,000, with the numbers rising to $58,000 and $73,000 if the show hit a 4th season. So imagine all the things that he just billed to Jill, that this was the cost of raising you. It cost like $130,000, babe. Like, that's money that you earned in like 3 episodes. 4, if we want to be like maybe thinking about taxes or something. Like, just a very bad person, Jim Bob. You're a very bad person. Pops later determined somehow that each child would receive 3% on their tax return each year. However, even this was a phantom payment, seemingly just reported on paper for tax purposes, with no apparent intention to actually pay out this amount. We would later be told that this previously reported income was an investment or inheritance that we would only have access to upon my parents' death. Like, how does that make sense? How does that make sense? That in their lifetime, like, thinking about how young Michelle and Jim Bob had these kids, that they're going to have to basically wait until they're like 60, maybe 50, to see a return of all that work and all that filming that they did. Why? Why does that make any sense? And I feel like it's still probably going to be the case where, you know what's so interesting about this? I guess because they're not acting, you know how there's that, is it the Duggar or whatever law, that if you're an actor, you have to get paid like at least 15% of the money has to be put into a trust for the kid for later. And it's just interesting that I guess that doesn't cover kids who are in reality TV. You know, there's all this debate about YouTube children not being protected by those laws. Oh, don't get me started on Carlin Bates and her daughter. But I'm interested to know, I guess, does that not extend to children on reality TV? And it would make sense in a reality like TV family setting that there isn't. I don't know, or maybe this is what they feel like, how they're getting away with this Dugan law stuff. This is like just when you have to wait till they die to get it. Like basically when you're going to be having your own grandkids is when you're going to be able to experience that money. And like, I know money isn't everything, but it's just weird that one, with inflation, the economy as it is, that why wouldn't you want to give them this money to start their lives with and to have for their lives? Like, it's so weird. It doesn't make any sense. As though you don't trust them with this money. Like, haven't you been raising them their entire life to manage, buy you, save the difference? Okay, like having to go to all those seminars about living debt free. I don't know how many times we've had to listen to them about how they purpose to not go into any debt, including not having a mortgage, their cars, not having credit cards, blah, 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 blah. Like, we did the numbers. Over the years, there had been well over 300 shows, for which we estimated that TLC had paid Mad Family Inc. over $8 million total. Our wedding alone had netted well over $100,000 for Pops, and Israel's birth had been the focus of 2 special episodes, earning Pops another 6-figure sum. Yet when we'd asked him to cover our $10,000 deductible and out-of-pocket expenses from the hospital stay, he had pushed back. Straight to hell. Straight. No looking back. Over the years, Pops had bought more and more properties, and his fleet of private aircraft now contained multiple airplanes, including one with 10 seats. There was no denying that he was a generous man who helped a lot of people, but it was also true that he'd grown rich off the show and had fought hard to keep that under wraps. For sure. I think what's just so like sad is the kids not knowing that he's making all this money and not having the kind of insight to think that. Because I think for a long time, all of them were saying like, oh yeah, we don't get paid for this. And it's like, oh, you guys don't get paid for this. But, you know, it's a family ministry. Basically, we do it for free. It's a burden of love. Like, there's no way in hell you guys would be doing this for free. That, like, I wonder, was the disconnect that you're not entitled to money, that you're volunteering to do this for your family, or that it's just not enough money to be like asking for it? Like, I get that it's the way that it's been presented to them, that, oh, it's a ministry. It's not something that we would be getting paid for from like that. I don't know. Because I'm sure people around them must have been assuming like, you guys are getting paid and making money off of this. Like, there's no way you're not. So I just don't. I can understand the kids not knowing that because they don't watch television. They don't engage with like the secular world in a way that they might look up like, hey, what do television shows usually make per episode? You know what I mean? Like, I probably wouldn't know that, except that they post things online where it's like, oh, this actor was able to demand $1 million per episode during season 8, you know? And that's what implies that, oh, these television shows must be making a lot of money if you can demand, you know, $20,000 or whatever, $1 million per episode. What does that say? Like, how expensive the production probably is, how much value there is in that. But if you don't know that because you're not exposed to those kinds of things, of course, you're going to believe when your parents say, oh, we're not making money like that. Or you're a volunteer for this. Like, it makes sense why a parent might not share with a child a money aspect type of thing. But I think it's the greed that once they became adults, that you still weren't giving them access to that money when they were the show. You know what I mean? Like, obviously, yes, Jim Bob is a weirdo. So there are those moments that we watch too for them, for sure. Like for him, because he's weird and awkward and uncomfortable and just like cringy and kind of a villain. But the children, it's 19 kids and counting. They're the stars of this show. And it's just really, really crazy. I just feel like that's so sinister that they have to wait for you to die to get that money. It's like, because it's almost like evil to suggest that you want it, because that means you have to want your parents to die. Like, that's so horrible. Like, I just don't get it. I just don't get it at all. Shout out to Jill and them for staying true and getting their money. And was it at all what they were worth? In my opinion, no. But I'm glad that they stood hard and decided to receive it. And for like the siblings and the people like within, I'm sure, the fundamentalism circle who think that, this was so wrong to do this all over money, it's getting paid what you're owed, right? They counted the cost. Jill and Derek, truly, we're counting the cost. And the fact that none of the other siblings did, out of a sacredness, I guess, to maintain their relationship with their parent, which is understandable, it's just still like, you guys were done dirty and should know that. Like, because $175,000 really isn't that much money in the context of having made $8 million since 2014. It's not. It's not. Even if we timed that times 19, it still wouldn't be equivalent to the $8 million that he received. So, I guess, but I hope I'm still interested in this one when they do die, so I can be like, all right, what was that trust looking like? I want to know. They probably put an NDA embedded into that inheritance. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about Jill's book versus Ginger's book, and then I'm going to talk about some of the interesting ways that this book is a tell-all. Jill's book.
Let's go. It's like, you niggas gotta stop acting weird.